Hi, and welcome back. So in today's video, we are going to talk about the costumes of the two TV series or period dramas, Magnificent Century and Kösem. Both of them known here in Argentina as El Sultán y Kösem, La Gran Sultana. I'm not going to be focusing on every single design of each character, but in more as a general idea and the general aesthetic of the whole series. And also, I just want to get this out of the way. I'm not a dress historian. I'm not entirely an expert on clothing of the Ottoman Empire, so I am here talking in a place of admire it. So without any further ado, let's go. So Magnificent Century or El Sultan takes place in the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, which took place between 1520 and 1566, which are 45 years. This is a big difference in Kösem, which even though it is fully centered in her story, we see multiple sultans. Ahmed I, Mustafa I, Osman II, Murad IV, Ibrahim I, and Mehmed IV. And with all of the sultans and Kösem's reign, we can say that this series takes place in 60 years. A lot of time. And with all those years and all those decades, one will assume that this series shows all of the changes in fashion, isn't it? Well, they don't. And I am not actually saying that the costumes of these two incredible series and dramas are like ugly or whatever. They are extremely beautiful with historical accuracy or isn't. It definitely deserves to be talked more about. Now, the same as with European fashion, the Ottoman Empire fashion has a lot of changes in the silhouettes, in the trends, and in the overall fashions of each decade. Now, the overall design of the series is really Western-centric in itself. And this is something that the designers of the two series wanted to make, mostly because they wanted to make the series centered to a wide audience. So that's why most of the designs are looking a bit too European, a bit too Western if we look at with Ottoman Empire eyes. And now I'm going to be talking about the consequences with that and the problem that I say in the title of the video and why I say that. And that's because I think it's so unfortunate that they didn't really want to show how the women and the men used to dress back then. And I think it was such a missed opportunity in really telling us and showing us the difference and to really prove there was a big difference between Western European and, you know, Ottoman Empire fashion. But in the series, they look a little similar, but not to the actual dresses that they were using, because 16th century dresses didn't look like this. But they are really mostly a modern view of how Renaissance and Baroque dresses used to be, and a little inspiration from other modern eras and other period of fashions in general. And I think it is so sad because Western and European fashions always took a lot of inspiration, and not only inspiration but appropriation in terms of Turkish fashions or Ottoman Empire fashions. We can see that in the Western world they were really used. Now with that, I say it is really a problem in terms of why this show didn't want to really tell the whole real story in terms of their fashion. I think it's kind of sad that they didn't want to do that and that they didn't even try in some aspects, and we'll actually talk about that in a minute. Now, men's clothing in the series is a bit better in terms of historical accuracy. They are better than women's fashions, which is I mean, it was obvious that they were gonna do that, but we can see that all of the men are wearing turbans. They are wearing a lot of heavy fabrics, a lot of rich looking fabrics. There are three things that I see in most of the men's fashions that are a bit meh. How tight the clothes look. Like if you compare them to, I don't know, 16th or even 17th century drawings or paintings of what men's looked, you can see that the men look big. They look huge. And that's because the fabrics and the whole clothing and the fashion of them were big. Another weird thing is the use of leather in some of the clothing. Those are my opinions in the men's clothing. Let's go to women's clothing, which is the big problem in here. Beautiful to our modern eyes, but to 16th or 17th century eyes, they look really European and they are not really convincing everybody of like the basis and what the clothing of the time really was. And also, no, Ottoman Empire women didn't wear corsets or stays, as some examples in the series shows that they did. No, that's a really Western thing. And I'm not saying that some women of the Ottoman Empire were also a little inspired by Western fashions. And we can see that in this drawing from the 1720s, I think. So now let's talk about the basis and what the women really wore in general. In the 16th and 17th century, we can see that women were wearing almost the same thing, but the difference is in the different type of fabrics that they were using, the different colors, the different symbolism, but the overall layers of clothing are mostly the same. The first layer that most of the women wore was a gomlek, or a, sorry in the pronunciation, but this was a shift or a chemise. Then most of the women wore pants or trousers. Most of them were by linen, but if they were meant to be shown, they were made in silk or taffeta or other heavy brocade fabrics, and it was named kakser. Then of course we have it kind of resembles a dress, and this is a kaftan. We have a lot of kaftans of the period or the 17th or 18th century that you can see how they look, and you can see a lot of them in the drawings and paintings of women's fashion. Then they wore a Sivin, which was a smaller inner jacket, and the last layer of the general look was a Cusack, or basically this, which was really heavily embroidered. If it was made with fabric, or if it was made with jewels, it was heavily bejeweled. Then we have the headwear or headdresses, and most of the women in the series wear veils or literally tiaras or crowns that look really modern. Some of them kind of like resemble some of the headdresses that they wore, but they didn't look like that. Some tiaras even look like 19th century tiaras, for real. Now the difference in between the headdresses and what women wore, it was mostly because of your status. Women of a higher status were using also turbans, but they looked incredibly rich. They look expensive because of the fabric that it was used, because of the jewels that it had. And I'm gonna say now most of the headdresses that they were wearing in this time. So of course we have the turbans, which are mostly known by everybody. Then we have the bedazzled and bejeweled odos, the fez, or sometimes it was smaller and sometimes it was huge. And also between the last half of the 16th century and the start of the 17th century, we can see a really significant fashion that I think you can see that in the series they were inspired by that sometimes, which was they were using tiaras or crowns and turbans, using both of them as, you know, a way of showing power and status, and they look really beautiful. You can see that some of them are wearing different type of jewelry and jewels in their hair or in their turbans. Of course, the richest one, bigger one, the one that was covered in beautiful fabrics, covered in beautiful jewels. This was a meaning that this woman was really important, that she was either the mother or the wife or favorite of the Sultan. Now, I am very glad that in the series they really take a focus on the Sultanate of women, which is an amazing and awesome period of this time, and they showed that in the series, and I'm really glad they did, and they represent that in the clothing that they were wearing, why they look so extravagant. So I'm really happy for that, because not in all of the Ottoman Empire you can see women having participation in politics. For example, in the series, we can see that Hurrem Sultan is wearing a lot of reds and purples and greens, and that is accurate, but not in this way. Most of the colors of this time were worn in the kaftan or the sivan. One of the things that was really famous, and it was a trend in the beginning of the 16th century, was a kaftan full of tulips. The tulips were really fashionable and really famous in this time, so you can see that Hurrem Sultan actually was famous by wearing this. Also, the crown of Hurrem Sultan is inspired by the real crown that she was wearing, this amazing tiara that Suleiman I gifted her as a way of differentiating her from all the other women in the harem. And we can see that in the series they were inspired by this crown, and it looks really good actually. It's one of the few crowns and headdresses that look accurate. Also, we have some headbands or tiaras, which were said back then, that were used by Hurrem, and we can see that some examples of them. They were basically headbands that were embroidered and that they were made of fabric. Sometimes they had some jewels embroidered in them. Another thing is that I really want to say and get out of the way is when we go to search, for example, Hurrem Sultan or Kösem Sultan, we found out this type of portraits. And some people say that this is how they accurately looked like. And it's not really true, because women of the harem were not meant to be seen by other men. They did not get out of the palace or out of the castle or out of the harem without the permission of the Sultan, or if they were really powerful. And they did not went out with her face to be seen. No, they were covered in fabric. They were not meant to be seen. So this is another thing that really, it's a conflict with the Western portraits of this woman, that people think that this is how they accurately look like. And no, this is a depiction. This is a depiction that the painter wanted to show of how he thinks, how he thought this woman might have looked like. These are not how the real sultanas looked like. Now, as the last part, I really wanted to mention something that is, I think, really iconic, and I think is really, it really shows how powerful this woman were. Hurrem Sultan had communication via letters with the King of Poland, Sigismund, and she taught her daughter to also still communicate with him. So this king actually communicated with these two really powerful women. Also, Nurbanu Sultan, which was the wife of Selim II, talked again via letters with Catherine de' Medici, Henry II's wife. And Safiya Sultan, the powerful Valide Sultan, had conversations via letters again with Elizabeth I of England. Now, of course, Kösem Sultan was the most powerful, was the most important, and it is the most powerful and most important woman of the whole Ottoman Empire. And we can see that in how they dressed her in the series and how powerful and amazing she looks. I loved all of the actresses that portrayed her. Okay, so this was the whole video.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before.
I hope you liked it, and I hope that, you know, you could understand some of the things that I said. I'm sorry if sometimes it's like, what is she saying? But I hope everybody liked it, and if you want to learn more about Ottoman Empire clothing and this woman, I mean this Sultanate of women, I'm gonna leave some pages and YouTube channels that talked about them that are so nice in the comments below. So I hope everybody likes it. I hope you subscribe and click like, and yeah, see you guys later. Mwah.
It's gonna be so bad. Okay.